Hello and welcome to Insomniac Dose. You're welcome to comment your city and the time below. I always enjoy reading them. If you find these stories interesting, please consider subscribing. Let's start tonight's story. I needed the money. That's what I keep telling myself when I think back to that first night, when I should have walked away, when every instinct whispered that something was fundamentally wrong with the whole arrangement. But rent in New York doesn't negotiate, and my savings account had been running on fumes for 3 months. So when the job posting appeared, night cleaner at the Astoria Grand, $38 an hour plus overnight differential, I applied before I could talk myself out of it. The interview lasted 7 minutes. I met with Ms. Voss in a windowless office on the 2nd floor, so silent I could hear my own breathing. She was somewhere between 50 and ageless, with silver hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful, and a navy suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her office smelled like expensive paper and something else, something medicinal like alcohol wipes or preservative. She asked me 3 questions. Could I work alone? Did I follow instructions? Precisely? Was I comfortable with silence? I said yes to all 3. She slid a contract across the desk, told me to start that night at 11 p.m., and informed me that housekeeping uniforms would be provided. Her smile never reached her eyes. When I stood to leave, I noticed she had a small nameplate on her desk that read, Night Operations Supervisor, not Housekeeping Manager or Facilities Director, just Night Operations. The specificity felt strange, like a title designed to avoid explanation. The Astoria Grand sits on East 64th Street, nestled between buildings that house old money and older secrets. It's the kind of place that doesn't advertise, doesn't have a garish sign, doesn't need to compete. Wealth whispers here, it doesn't shout. The facade is understated limestone, the awning a deep forest green with gold lettering so discreet you'd walk past it if you weren't looking. Inside, the lobby is all marble floors and brass railings that gleam like they're polished hourly. Crystal chandeliers hang from coffered ceilings, and the furniture looks like it belongs in a museum. Everything absorbs sound. The rugs, the walls, the air itself. It's the quietest place I've ever been in Manhattan, and that alone should have warned me. Ms. Voss met me in the staff entrance at 10:45 p.m., already dressed as though she'd been there for hours. She handed me a uniform, black pants, white button-down shirt, black vest with the Astoria Grand embroidered in gold, and told me to change quickly. The staff locker room was spotless and empty, with rows of gray lockers that looked untouched. Mine was labeled with a number I hadn't been assigned, 19. I didn't think much of it then. The tour began at 11 p.m. exactly. Ms. Voss led me through service corridors I hadn't known existed, narrow hallways with industrial carpet and fluorescent lighting that hummed at a frequency that made my teeth ache. She showed me the linen room stacked with sheets so white they almost glowed, towels folded with military precision. She showed me the supply closets, organized with the kind of exactness that suggested someone had been fired for misplacing a bottle of glass cleaner. She showed me the staff elevators, older than the guest elevators, with brass gates and buttons that clicked heavily when pressed. But when we reached the east wing of the 3rd floor, something changed. Ms. Voss's path curved subtly but unmistakably, steering us around a particular corridor. She didn't acknowledge it, didn't comment on the detour. She simply walked as if the hallway didn't exist, her heels clicking in a different rhythm, faster, more purposeful. I glanced down the avoided corridor. It looked identical to every other hallway, maybe a shade darker. But before I could study it, Ms. Voss cleared her throat sharply. "Your floors are 8 through 14, she said, her tone clipped. "You'll receive your nightly task list on this." She handed me a small device, like an outdated, Smartphone with a cracked screen protector and a single app open. A checklist organized by room number. You follow the list, you don't deviate, you don't explore, understood? I nodded. Back in the main supply closet on the 8th floor, my assigned starting point, Ms. Voss opened a locked cabinet and removed a slim black folder. It was the kind of folder you'd use for important documents, vinyl with a subtle grain, embossed with the hotel's crest. She placed it on my cleaning cart with the same care someone might handle a legal contract. "Housekeeping night protocol," she said. "Read it thoroughly before you begin. Follow it exactly. There are no exceptions, no creative interpretations, no judgment calls. If a situation arises that isn't covered in the protocol, you radio me immediately. You do not problem solve. You do not improvise. Are we clear?" Her intensity was unnerving. This wasn't a pep talk or a training speech. This was a warning. "Clear," I said. She left without another word, her footsteps fading into the silence until I couldn't tell if she'd taken the elevator or simply vanished. I opened the folder. The first page was formatted like corporate policy, headers, bullet points, professional language. But the content made my skin prickle. Housekeeping night protocol. Mandatory compliance. 1. Never enter a room with a do not disturb sign printed in silver ink. Mark the room as deferred on your device and move to the next task. 2. If you hear a guest humming in an empty suite, do not answer. Do not acknowledge, do not investigate. Continue working as planned. 3. Do not use mirrors to check behind you after 1 a.m. If you must verify your surroundings, turn completely around. 4. If the carpet feels wet on the 19th floor, request a replacement cart immediately and leave the floor using the main elevator. Do not investigate the source. 5. Do not use the East Service stairwell between 12 a.m. and 2 a.m. 6. If a room marked vacant on your schedule contains sounds of distress, do not enter. Notify security via radio code yellow and continue your route. I read through all 14 rules twice, my heart beating a little faster with each one. They were written like safety instructions, but they described situations that shouldn't exist. Silver ink on do not disturb signs, humming in empty rooms, wet carpet on a floor that, I quickly counted, shouldn't even exist in a 14-story building. I told myself it was eccentricity. Rich people have strange requests. Maybe silver ink tags were for VIPs who didn't want to be disturbed under any circumstances. Maybe humming was code for white noise machines. Maybe the 19th floor was a typo, a leftover rule from a previous location. I needed the money. I needed this job. I closed the folder, placed it in the cart's bottom shelf, and checked my task list. Room 808, fresh linens, standard turn-down service. I pushed the cart into the hallway, and the silence swallowed the sound of the wheels almost immediately. The Astoria Grand didn't just absorb noise, it erased it like the building itself was holding its breath. The hallway stretched ahead, lit by sconces that cast amber light in pools, leaving gaps of shadow between them. The carpet was patterned with ornate florals, the kind that could hide stains or, I realized with a chill, footprints. I started walking, and I swear, though I can't prove it, I felt the hotel notice me. It felt like stepping onto a stage where the audience is hidden, where you can't see them, but you know, with absolute certainty, that they're watching. Room 808 was straightforward, linens changed, bathroom restocked, curtains adjusted to the exact quarter-inch gap specified in the training manual. The guest had left a $5 bill on the nightstand, folded once, lengthwise. I pocketed it without thinking, grateful for the small kindness. The room smelled like lavender and something faintly citrus, the scent piped through the ventilation in a way that felt calculated, designed to soothe. I finished in 12 minutes and moved on. The floors were eerily silent. It was past midnight now, and I'd expected, hoped for even, the distant sound of television through doors or muffled conversation or at least the ambient hum of a building full of people. But the Astoria Grand gave me nothing. The thick walls, the heavy doors, the carpet that swallowed every footstep, it all combined to create a suffocating quiet that made my ears ring. I started humming under my breath just to fill the void, but the sound felt wrong, intrusive, so I stopped. By 12:30 a.m., I'd cleaned 6 rooms without incident. My cart rolled smoothly, the wheels well-oiled and oddly silent, gliding over the carpet like I was pushing it through water. The hallways curved gently, the layout designed to make the floor feel endless and intimate at the same time. Every 20 feet I'd pass a mirror, gilded frames, antique glass that reflected everything with a slight warping, like looking into the past. I avoided looking at them too long. Something about my own reflection in this place made me uncomfortable. Room 823 was next on my list. I turned the corner into the north corridor and stopped. At the far end of the hallway, maybe 40 feet away, a door had a sign hanging from its brass handle. "Do not disturb." That wasn't unusual. I'd seen 3 already tonight and had marked them as deferred. But as I pushed my cart closer, something about this one pulled my attention, held it. The sign wasn't the standard black and gold placard I'd seen throughout the hotel. This one was silver. Not metallic gold spray-painted to look silver. Not white with gray text. This was silver ink on black cardstock, reflective like foil, catching the light in a way that made it shimmer, almost glow. The text was the same, "Do not disturb," but the letters seemed to pulse faintly as though lit from behind. I stopped the cart 10 feet away, and the first rule from the folder flashed through my mind, word for word. Never enter a room with a "Do not disturb" sign printed in silver ink. I exhaled slowly, telling myself it was a VIP thing. Celebrities stayed here. Diplomats, people who valued privacy so intensely that they had custom signage. That made sense. That was logical, but I didn't move. The hallway felt different now, the air thicker, the silence deeper. I glanced at my device. Room 823 wasn't on my list for tonight. I had no reason to approach the door. I should have turned around and continued to my next task. Instead, I took 3 steps closer. I told myself I just wanted to see the room number to confirm it wasn't one I'd been assigned. I kept my cart behind me, my hands empty, non-threatening, as if the door could judge my intent. The number was engraved on a small brass plate, 823. And then I heard it, humming. Soft, melodic, lilting. A lullaby or something close to it, the kind of sound that should have been comforting, familiar but wasn't. It came from inside the room, muffled but clear, rising and falling in a rhythm that felt rehearsed, deliberate. Someone was in there. That made sense. It was a hotel. People stayed in rooms, they hummed, they sang in the shower, The humming stopped, not faded, not trailed off, stopped. Mid-phrase, like someone had pressed pause on a recording. I held my breath. The hallway lights dimmed, not flickered, dimmed. Gradually, smoothly, as if the building itself was lowering the wattage, adjusting the ambiance for an audience of one. The shadows between the sconces grew longer, deeper, and I became acutely aware of how far I was from the staff elevator, how alone I was on this floor. I took a step back, then another, my heart beat loud in my ears. The door to room 823 remained closed. The silver sign hung perfectly still, not swaying, not moving, but somehow I felt like it was watching me. Like the door itself was aware I'd broken protocol, that I'd come too close. My radio crackled. I jumped, nearly knocking over a bottle of surface cleaner on my cart. "Do not approach room 823 again." Ms. Voss's voice, calm and cold, crackled through the static like she was standing right behind me. I fumbled for the radio on my belt, hands shaking. I didn't enter. I just saw the sign and I did not ask for an explanation. Move to your next assigned task now. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the radio, my pulse hammering. I hadn't called her. I hadn't reported anything. She couldn't have seen me. There were no cameras in the guest hallways, only in the stairwells and service areas. So how did she know? I looked back at the door. The lights had returned to their normal brightness, the shadows retreating. The silver sign gleamed, innocent and elegant, just a sign. But I knew better now. The rules weren't suggestions. They weren't corporate liability jargon or management paranoia. They were warnings. And something in this hotel was listening. I turned my cart around and walked quickly toward room 824, my next task, refusing to look back. My hands were still shaking when I swiped my keycard. The room was empty, untouched, the bed made with mechanical perfection. I went through the motions, checked the bathroom, replaced the towels, straightened the desk, but my mind was still in that hallway, replaying the moment the humming stopped, the way the lights dimmed like a predator narrowing its eyes. I thought about quitting, walking out right then, leaving the cart in the middle of the room, taking the elevator down and never coming back. But I needed the money. And somewhere in a part of my brain I didn't want to acknowledge, I needed to know what I'd just encountered. I finished room 824 in silence, listening for the humming that never came, and moved on. The rest of the night passed without incident, but the hotel felt different now, aware of me, watching, waiting to see if I'd follow the rules or test them. I marked room 823 as deferred on my device, and when I did, the screen flickered for just a moment, displaying a message I didn't have time to read before it vanished. By 6 a.m., the daylight was starting to bleed through the edges of the heavy blackout curtains in the guest rooms. I returned my cart to the supply closet, logged out on my device, and took the staff elevator down. Ms. Voss was waiting in the lobby, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. "You followed the protocol," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. Good. Same time tomorrow." She walked away before I could say anything else, her heels clicking on the marble, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the silence. I stepped outside into the cold November morning, and the noise of the city hit me like a wave. Cars honking, people shouting, the rumble of the subway beneath my feet. It was jarring, overwhelming, and real. I stood on the sidewalk for 5 minutes, letting the chaos wash over me, reminding myself that the world outside the Astoria Grand still existed. But when I closed my eyes, I could still hear it. The humming. Soft, patient waiting. I met Danny on my third night. He was already in the staff locker room when I arrived, half-dressed in his uniform, eating a sandwich that smelled like garlic and vinegar. He looked like he was in his mid-40s with thinning hair, tired eyes, and the kind of comfortable slouch that comes from years of not caring what management thinks. His vest hung open, his shirt tail was untucked, and he had a coffee-stained name tag pinned crookedly to his chest. "You're the new guy," he said, not looking up. "Yes, started Monday." He took another bite, chewing slowly. "You'll quit by Friday, they always do." "Why?" He finally looked at me, one eyebrow raised, amused. "You read the folder yet?" I nodded. "And you think it's real?" I hesitated. I didn't know how to answer that, the humming, the dimming lights, Ms. Voss's impossible timing. None of it made sense, but I couldn't deny what I'd experienced. Danny laughed, a short bark of sound. "It's not. It's management's scare tactics. Keeps people obedient, keeps turnover high, keeps wages competitive because nobody stays long enough to ask for a raise. It's genius, really. I've been here 6 years. You know how many supernatural incidents I've seen? 0. He stood, crumpling his sandwich wrapper and tossing it into the trash with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. He clapped me on the shoulder as he passed. Stick with me tonight, kid. I'll show you how to actually get through a shift without having a panic attack. I didn't want to stick with him. Something about his confidence felt dangerous, like watching someone juggle knives and insisting they're rubber. But I also didn't want to be alone. And Danny's presence, loud, dismissive, human, was a relief. We took the service elevator up, together our carts side by side, and I noticed his was half empty. He saw me looking and grinned. Why carry shit you don't need? I take the basics, hit the rooms, done, no overthinking. What about the checklist? What about it? He pulled out his device, older than mine, the screen cracked and held together with packing tape, and swiped through the tasks without reading them. It's a suggestion. You finish fast, you get to sit in the break room and watch TV. You follow every little step. You're here till dawn like some kind of martyr. The elevator doors opened on the 8th floor and we stepped into the familiar silence. Danny moved immediately, pushing his cart with a speed I hadn't seen before, his wheels squeaking faintly. He clearly didn't care about noise. "East stairwell's faster," he said over his shoulder. "Cuts 10 minutes off your route if you're smart about it. The protocol says not to use it between midnight and 2 a.m. He stopped, turned, and gave me a look that was half pity, half amusement. "The protocol says a lot of things. You gonna let a piece of paper run your life?" He pushed open the door to the east stairwell, a heavy gray door I'd been avoiding all week, and stepped inside without hesitation. The door swung shut behind him with a muted thud, and I stood there alone in the hallway, my cart suddenly feeling heavier. I should have stayed on my route. I should have followed the rules. But I didn't want to look like a coward, and I didn't want to be alone. I pushed my cart through the door and into the stairwell. The east stairwell was colder than the rest of the hotel. The air tasted metallic like old pipes and concrete dust, and the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a rhythm that felt irregular, off-tempo. The stairs were concrete, painted gray with metal railings that were slightly sticky to the touch. Danny was already 2 flights down, moving fast, his footsteps echoing in a way that sounded wrong, too distant, like the space was bigger than it should be. I followed, my cart bumping awkwardly on each step, the noise sharp and grating. The stairwell smelled like cleaning products and something else, something faintly organic, like mildew or damp wood. Danny reached the landing for the 6th floor and stopped, waiting for me to catch up. He wasn't even breathing hard. "See? Shortcut. Saves you from riding the elevator 6 times. You're welcome." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The stairwell felt longer than it should. The space between floors stretched, as if the building was accommodating more distance than physics allowed. "You coming?" Danny was already moving again, his cartwheels rattling on the next flight. We reached what should have been the 5th floor, but the door we passed had no number. Just a blank metal plate where the floor indicator should have been. I slowed, staring at it, and Danny noticed. "What?" "That door doesn't have a number." He glanced back, shrugged. "Maintenance level, storage, who cares?" He kept going. But I cared because 2 flights later there was another door, and this one had a number. 19.5. The number was engraved in brass, just like the others, but the font was slightly different. Older, more ornate, as if it had been installed decades before the rest. The door itself looked heavier, the paint darker, and there was no window, no indicator light, nothing to suggest what was behind it. Danny had stopped moving. He stood on the landing below, staring up at the door, his cocky expression gone. "That wasn't there before," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've used this stairwell 100 times, and that door has never been there." We stood in silence, both of us staring at the impossible floor number. The fluorescent light above it flickered once, then went out, leaving the door in shadow. "Let's keep moving," I said, my voice tight. Danny nodded, but he moved more slowly. Now, less confident, glancing over his shoulder as we continued down. By the time we reached the fourth-floor exit, he was pale, his hands gripping the cart handle too tightly. "We should have taken the elevator," he muttered. We split up after that, each taking our assigned floors. Danny's bravado had cracked, but he tried to laugh it off, muttering something about architectural quirks and old buildings. I didn't argue. I just wanted distance from the stairwell, from the door that shouldn't exist. By 1:15 a.m., I was finishing room 1107 when my radio crackled. "Hey, kid, you gotta see this." Danny's voice, too loud, too excited, the fear from earlier replaced with manic energy. "See what?" Just get to 1142. You're not gonna believe this view. It's insane." I hesitated, checking my device. Room 1142 wasn't on my list. "That's not my floor, Danny." "Dude, just come see it. 5 seconds, trust me." The line went silent. I stood there, every instinct screaming at me to stay on task, to follow the rules, to not deviate. But Danny sounded genuinely amazed, not scared, and part of me wanted to believe the hotel could be normal, that it could have moments of beauty instead of dread. I pushed my cart toward room 1142. The door was ajar, light spilling into the hallway. I could see Danny's cart parked just inside, and I could hear him moving around, opening curtains. "Danny? In here, come on." I stepped to the threshold and looked inside. The suite was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture that looked hand-carved, a chandelier that caught the light from the city and scattered it like stars. And Danny stood in the center of the room, arms spread, grinning like a kid. "See? Told you. This is why people pay $5,000 a night." But something was wrong. The mirror on the far wall, a full-length antique mirror with a gold frame. It reflected the room perfectly, the furniture, the chandelier, the windows. And it reflected Danny, but not where he was standing. In the reflection, Danny stood directly behind me in the doorway, his face inches from the back of my head. I spun around. The hallway was empty. I looked back at the mirror. Danny's reflection was still there, still behind me, still smiling. And then I looked at the real Danny standing across the room and saw his face go slack. "Why am I over there?" he whispered, staring at the mirror. His reflection tilted its head and smiled. Before Danny did, the lights went out. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, the room was pitch black. I couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything except my own heartbeat and a faint sound, a soft rustle, like fabric sliding across carpet. The lights came back on. Danny was gone. His cart was still rolling, wheels turning slowly as someone had just pushed it. It coasted toward the door, toward me, and stopped with a soft bump against the frame. I stumbled backward into the hallway, my breath coming in short gasps, and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip my radio. Ms. Voss, Danny's, he's gone, where are you?" 11th floor, room 1142, he disappeared. There was a mirror and, "Do not re-enter that room. Return to your cart and continue your route. I will handle this." "Handle what? He's gone." "That is not your concern. Return to your tasks, now." The line went dead. I stood there staring at the closed door, at Danny's cart still parked innocently in the hallway. And I knew with absolute certainty that he wasn't coming back. The hotel had him, and the rules had tried to warn us. I didn't finish my route that night. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every shadow in every hallway looked like it was moving, reshaping itself, waiting. I radioed Ms. Voss at 3 a.m. and told her I was unwell, which wasn't a lie. She told me to clock out and return tomorrow night. Her voice held no sympathy, no acknowledgement of what had just happened. It was as if Danny had never existed. I took the main elevator down, refusing to even look at the east stairwell, and when I reached the lobby, I saw two men in dark suits standing near the concierge desk, speaking quietly with Ms. Voss. They weren't police. Their presence was too controlled, too deliberate. Private security, maybe, or something else. Ms. Voss glanced at me once, her expression blank, then returned to her conversation as if I were invisible. I left through the staff entrance and walked 12 blocks before I stopped shaking. At home, I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Danny's reflection smiling out of sync. Saw the lights cutting out. Saw the empty space where he'd been standing. I told myself to quit, to never go back, to find another job, any job. But when 10 p.m. rolled around the next night, I got dressed, pulled on my jacket, and took the subway to East 64th Street. I had to know. Ms. Voss said nothing about Danny when I arrived. His locker had been cleared out, his name removed from the staff roster board in the break room. It was as if he'd never worked there. I wanted to ask, wanted to demand answers, but the look in Ms. Voss's eyes when she handed me my device stopped me cold. It wasn't a warning. It was certainty. Certainty that I already knew the answers and that asking would only confirm I was a liability. Floors 8 through 14, she said. Standard protocol. I nodded and took my card upstairs. But I didn't start my tasks immediately. Instead, I went to the staff office on the 9th floor, a small room tucked behind the linen closet used for paperwork and old filing cabinets that hadn't been digitized. The door was usually locked, but tonight it was ajar, as if someone had forgotten to secure it. I slipped inside. The room smelled like old paper and toner ink. A single desk sat against the wall covered in binders and clipboards, and behind it were rows of filing cabinets, labeled by year. I started with the most recent 2023 and rifled through the folders until I found one marked Incident Reports, Night Operations. My hands were sweating as I opened it. The reports were typed on hotel letterhead, clinical and brief, written in the same detached language as the protocol folder. Most were mundane, guests locked out of rooms, broken fixtures, noise complaints, but scattered among them were entries that made my stomach drop. 09-14-2023, guest misidentification event. Room 1523, night cleaner reported hearing distress from vacant suite. Security responded, no guest located. Cleaner reminded of protocol section 6. 07-22-2023, mirror compliance failure, room 1142. Cleaner failed to follow section 3 protocol. Incident resolved, staff replacement initiated. 05-30-2023, wet carpet event, floor 19. Maintenance reported recurring moisture anomaly. Source unidentified. Cleaning staff advised to avoid the area per protocol section 4. 03-11-2023, silver D&D incident, room 823. Unauthorized entry attempt by guest services. Protocol breach logged. No further action required. There were dozens of entries going back years, each one describing the same kinds of impossible events I'd witnessed, written as if they were routine, expected, manageable. And at the bottom of many reports, stamped in red ink, was a single phrase: incident contained. I flipped further back into older files and found handwritten logs, entries from the 1990s, the 1980s, even older. The language was more formal, the handwriting elegant and precise, but the content was the same. 11-03-1987. Unauthorized floor access via east stairwell. Maintenance sealed door 19 and a half. No recovery attempted. 06-18-1974. Reflection anomaly reported in guest suites 800-850. Mirrors replaced. Protocol updated. 02-09-1961. Night staff reported humming from unoccupied rooms. Advised to continue standard duties. Incidents decreased after protocol. Enforcement. The hotel had been doing this for decades, maybe longer. The rules weren't new, they were refined, updated with each generation of staff who tested them and failed. I found a folder near the back labeled Floor Registry, Authorized Access Only. Inside was a map. It was a blueprint of the hotel, but not the version guests saw. This map included floors that didn't appear on the elevator buttons, corridors that curved into spaces that shouldn't exist, rooms with numbers like 19 and a half, 23B, 7 rear. Some were marked with red X's, others had notes scrawled in the margins. Do not assign. Deprecated, unsafe, monitor only. The Astoria Grand wasn't just 14 floors, it was layered, folded, a structure that extended into dimensions the architects hadn't planned, or had planned and then tried to forget. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I shoved the files back into the cabinet, slipped out of the office, and grabbed my cart, heart pounding. Ms. Voss walked past. A moment later, her gaze sweeping the hallway with the precision of a security camera. She didn't look at me, but I knew she knew I'd been in there. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The rest of the night felt different. I moved through my tasks with mechanical precision, but I couldn't stop thinking about the map, about the floors that weren't supposed to exist, about Danny standing in a room that had swallowed him whole. I started noticing things I'd dismissed before. The way certain hallways curved just slightly too much, bending in ways that didn't match the building's exterior dimensions. The way the elevator sometimes took too long between floors, as if traveling a greater distance than the button press suggested. The way doors at the end of corridors seemed farther away than they should be, perspective stretching like a funhouse mirror. And the mirrors. God, the mirrors. They were everywhere, decorative, functional, unavoidable. And after 1 a.m. I followed the rule religiously. I never used them to check behind me. I turned my whole body, forcing myself to look directly, refusing to rely on the reflection. Because I knew, with a certainty I couldn't explain, that if I looked into a mirror after 1 a.m., I might see something looking back that wasn't me. At 2:30 a.m. I passed the east stairwell. The door was closed, but I could hear something on the other side. A faint creaking, rhythmic like someone slowly climbing stairs. I pressed my ear to the door, barely breathing. The creaking stopped, and then from the other side, inches away, I heard breathing. I jerked back, stumbling into my cart, and the breathing stopped as abruptly as it had started. I didn't go near that door again. By 5 a.m. I was exhausted, my nerves frayed, my mind buzzing with too many questions. I returned to the supply closet to log out, and as I placed the protocol folder back in the cabinet, I noticed something I'd missed before. There was a second folder, smaller, tucked behind the first. I pulled it out. It was older, the vinyl cracked, the hotel crest faded. Inside was a single page typewritten on yellowed paper titled Supplementary Guidelines for Long-Term Night Staff. The rules were different here, more specific, more personal. If you see your own reflection when you do not pass a mirror, stop moving. Count to 10. Do not proceed until the reflection blinks. Do not accept folded tips left in vacant rooms. If a door you have cleaned appears again on your task list within the same shift, mark it as duplicate and do not re-enter. Never write your real name in the staff log. Use your assigned ID number only. I flipped the page over. On the back in faded pencil, someone had written a single sentence. The hotel doesn't keep you. It borrows pieces. Don't let it finish the collection. I stood there, staring at the words, and felt the temperature in the room drop. The hotel wasn't haunted, it was something worse. It was alive, and it was patient, and I had just signed on to work here 5 nights a week. I saw him for the first time at 3:47 a.m. on my 6th night. I'd been restocking my cart in the supply closet on the 10th floor when I heard the service elevator arrive with its characteristic metallic groan. The doors opened, and a man stepped out, older, maybe 60, dressed in a maintenance uniform that looked like it had been washed 1,000 times. He carried a toolbox in one hand and a clipboard in the other, and he moved with the slow, deliberate efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste motion. He didn't look at me at first. He walked past the closet, checked a light fixture that didn't appear to be broken, made a note on his clipboard, and then turned his head slightly, acknowledging my presence without meeting my eyes. "You're still here," he said. His voice was rough, quiet, like gravel settling. "I work here," I said, uncertain if he was talking to me or simply stating a fact. "Most don't last a week." He knelt beside an electrical panel, opened it with a key from his belt, and inspected the wiring inside. "You read the folder?" "Yes." "You follow it?" "Yes." He nodded, satisfied, and closed the panel. Then he stood, finally looking at me directly. His eyes were pale gray, tired but sharp, evaluating. "Then you're smarter than the last one." "Danny." He meant Danny. "What happened to him?" I asked, the question spilling out before I could stop it. The man, his name tag read Carver, tilted his head slightly as if weighing whether I deserved an answer. "He didn't follow the rules," Carver said simply. "So the hotel did what it does, which is collected him." The words hung in the air, cold and final. Carver picked up his toolbox and started walking toward the elevator. I followed without thinking, needing answers, needing someone who understood what this place was. "What do you mean, collected?" Carver pressed the elevator button and waited, staring at the brass doors. "The Astoria Grand isn't haunted. That's the wrong word. Haunted means something died and stayed. This place was never alive to begin with. It's something else. It's leased." "Leased?" The elevator arrived. Carver stepped inside and I followed, the doors closing behind us. He pressed the button for the basement level, sub-level 2, a floor I hadn't known existed. "Not by people," Carver continued, his tone matter-of-fact, like he was explaining how the HVAC system worked. "By something that likes luxury, privacy, order. It checks in, same as any guest, pays in ways you don't see, follows procedures, exploits politeness." The elevator descended, and I felt my stomach drop in a way that had nothing to do with gravity. "The guests, the ones in rooms like 823, they're not human." "They're guests," Carver said, as if that answered everything. "They book rooms. They request privacy. They follow hotel policy. And as long as we follow protocol, they stay in their rooms, and we stay in ours. It's a transaction." The elevator doors opened onto a dim hallway lined with pipes and old machinery, the air thick with the smell of oil and concrete. Carver stepped out and I followed, my pulse quickening. "Then why do people disappear?" I asked. "Why did Danny—" "Because he broke the rules," Carver interrupted, setting his toolbox down beside a junction box. "He used the stairwell during restricted hours. He entered rooms that weren't assigned to him. He looked into mirrors after hours. He acted like he owned the place." Carver opened the junction box, inspecting the wires with a small flashlight. "The hotel doesn't like that. It interprets curiosity as consent. And once it thinks you're asking to be part of it, it obliges." I felt cold, despite the stuffiness of the basement. "Part of it? How?" Carver glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "You ever notice how the hallways feel longer some nights? How do the floors not quite add up? How sounds echo? Wrong?" I nodded slowly. "That's because the hotel grows," Carver said. "Not outward, inward. It folds space, creates rooms that don't exist on blueprints and floors that aren't in the elevator. And it needs something to fill those spaces, echoes, shadows, impressions of people who got too curious." He closed the junction box with a metallic click. "Danny's not dead. He's just occupying a different part of the structure now." My throat was dry. "Can he be brought back?" "No." The answer was immediate, final. devoid of hope. Carver picked up his toolbox and started walking back toward the elevator. I stood there, frozen, until he called over his shoulder. "You coming?" We rode the elevator back up in silence. When we reached the 8th floor, Carver stopped me before I could step out. "You want to survive this job?" he asked. I nodded. "Then understand two things." He held up one finger. "First, the hotel doesn't care about you. You're not special, not chosen, not interesting. You're a cleaner. You touch every space, reset every surface, and remove every trace of the guests. That's useful. And as long as you're useful, it tolerates you." He held up a second finger. "Second, the moment you stop being useful, the moment it thinks you're curious, questioning, exploring, you stop being staff and start being inventory." The doors began to close, but Carver held them open with his hand. "One more thing," he said, his voice quieter now, almost reluctant. "Never accept a tip that's already folded." I frowned. "What?" "If you find money in a room and it's already folded, creased, or shaped, don't take it. Leave it where it is and report it as guest property, understand?" "Why?" Carver's expression darkened. "Because it means something left it for you specifically, it prepared it. And if you take it, you've accepted an offering. That changes the terms of your employment." Before I could ask what that meant, he released the elevator door and let it close, leaving me alone in the hallway. I thought about quitting. I thought about it every night, every time I clocked in, every time I pushed my cart into another silent hallway. But something kept me coming back. Not the money, not anymore. It was the need to understand, to map the rules, to learn how far I could push before the hotel pushed back. And I started noticing the tips. At first, I thought Carver was being paranoid. Tips were normal. Guests left cash on nightstands, dressers, and bathroom counters. Usually 5s or 10s, sometimes 20s, folded once lengthwise or left flat under a coffee cup. But then I started seeing them in vacant rooms. Rooms that weren't on my schedule, rooms that had no guest listed but still had lights on, curtains open, beds made, and a folded bill sitting in the center of the desk. Always folded the same way, into a small, neat triangle like a flag. I followed Carver's rule. I reported them as guest property, marked the rooms as anomalous, and moved on. But one night in room 1429, a room that had been on my schedule that I'd cleaned the night before, I found a $10 bill on the bathroom counter, folded into a triangle. I hadn't left it there. I'd cleaned that bathroom thoroughly, and no guest was listed for the room. I backed out slowly, radioed Ms. Voss, and waited. She arrived 10 minutes later, glanced at the bill, and removed it with a gloved hand, placing it in a small plastic bag she carried. "Good," she said, her tone neutral. "Continue your tasks." She left without explanation. That night, when I returned to the locker room at the end of my shift, I found something in my locker. A folded bill, a 20, creased into a perfect triangle. I stared at it, my heart pounding, and slammed the locker shut without touching it. Carver was right. The hotel was offering me something, and I had no idea what would happen if I accepted. It happened on my 9th night at 2:43 a.m. in the north corridor of the 12th floor. Was finishing room 1217. A straightforward turn down, linens and towels, nothing unusual when I heard it. Crying. Soft, muffled, desperate. The sound of someone trying to muffle sobs, failing, breaking down. It came from down the hall, from a room I hadn't been assigned. A room I'd passed twice already that night without incident. I checked my device. Room 1223, status vacant. The crying grew louder, more urgent, punctuated by gasping breaths. A woman's voice, young, terrified. "Please, someone, please." My chest tightened. Every instinct I had, every human impulse screamed at me to help. This wasn't a humming sound, wasn't an ambiguous echo. This was a person in distress, in pain, begging for help. I pulled out the protocol folder, hands shaking, and flipped to section 6. If a room marked vacant on your schedule contains sounds of distress, do not intervene. Notify security via radio code yellow and continue your route. I stared at the words, my breath coming faster. The jazz, crying, turned into sobbing, harsh and broken, and I heard a voice. Her voice pleading. I can't open it. Please, someone help me. I took a step toward the door before I realized I was moving. My hand reached for the radio, but I hesitated. Code yellow meant security would come, but how long would that take? 5 minutes? 10? What if she was hurt? What if someone was in there with her, hurting her, and I just stood here following orders? I moved closer to the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. The sobbing paused, and then a second voice spoke, calm and soothing like someone comforting a frightened child. It's okay. You're safe now. I'm here. The voice was familiar. It took me 3 seconds to realize why. It was my voice. My exact voice, my tone, my cadence. Speaking from inside a room I hadn't entered, comforting someone I hadn't met. I froze, my hand hovering inches from the door handle. The crying stopped, and then the woman's voice spoke again, quieter now, almost relieved. Thank you. You're so kind. The words landed like a fishhook in my chest, pulling tight, and I felt it. The pull to open the door, to step inside, to confirm that she was okay, that I'd helped, that I'd been kind. I took a step back, then another. My reflection stared at me from a hallway mirror, pale and wide-eyed, and I forced myself to turn away, to grab my cart, to walk. Behind me, the woman whispered one more time, so softly I almost didn't hear it. Why did you leave me? I didn't stop walking until I reached the service elevator. I radioed Ms. Voss from the elevator, my voice shaking so badly I could barely get the words out. Code yellow. Room 1223, 12th floor. Noted. Continue your tasks. But there's someone's in there, I heard. I said continue your tasks. The line went dead. I stood in the elevator, hands braced against the walls, trying to steady my breathing. I wanted to believe the protocol was wrong, that I'd just abandoned someone who needed help, that I was a coward. But I knew better. That wasn't a woman crying. That was the hotel learning what would make me open the door. It had tested my compassion, my guilt, my humanity, and it had nearly worked. I thought about Danny. Thought about the reflection that smiled too late. Thought about Carver's words. It interprets curiosity as consent. If I'd opened that door, if I'd stepped inside, I wouldn't have found a woman in distress. I would have found something in her voice, wearing my voice. And I would have become part of the room, part of the structure, another echo in the hotel's private geography. The rest of the night passed in a fog. I moved mechanically through my tasks, avoiding mirrors, avoiding doors that felt wrong, avoiding the north corridor entirely. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow looked like it was watching. At 4:30 a.m., I ran into Carver again, this time on the 13th floor. He was replacing a light bulb in a hallway sconce, standing on a small stepladder, methodical and calm. You look like hell, he said without looking at me. I almost opened a door. He paused, then continued unscrewing the bulb. But you didn't. I wanted to. Everyone does. He climbed down from the ladder, dropped the old bulb into a disposal bag, and finally met my eyes. That's the test. The hotel doesn't want people who blindly follow rules. It wants people who choose to follow them, even when it's hard. That's how it knows you're serious. Why? I asked, my voice hoarse. Why does it care? Carver folded the ladder and started walking, gesturing for me to follow. We stopped at a window overlooking Central Park, the city lights stretching out like a glittering grid. The hotel exists because of agreements, Carver said. Old agreements, the kind that don't get written down, that get passed from one manager to the next, one generation to the next. The things that stay here. They don't break the rules, they follow them, they check in. Properly they pay, they request privacy. And as long as we honor that, they stay contained. He turned to face me. But the system only works if the staff respects the boundaries. If we start opening doors we're not supposed to, answering calls we're not supposed to, taking offerings we're not supposed to, the rules break down. And when the rules break down, the hotel spreads. Spreads where? Everywhere. Carver gestured vaguely at the city beyond the glass. It's already bigger on the inside than the outside. You think that stops at the walls? You think it can't fold other spaces into itself if it gets strong enough? I stared at him, the weight of what he was saying settling over me like a lead blanket. So we're not protecting ourselves, I said slowly. We're protecting everyone else, Carver nodded. Now you're getting it. He walked away, leaving me standing at the window, staring out at a city that had no idea what was contained in the building on East 64th Street, and, for the first time, I understood why I couldn't quit. Not because I needed the money, but because if I left, someone else would take my place. Someone who might not follow the rules, someone who might open the wrong door. And the hotel would grow. It started small. On my 11th night, my task list updated mid-shift. I was halfway through the 9th floor when the device in my hand buzzed, and a new line appeared at the top of the screen. Priority task. Floor 19. Wet carpet remediation. Report to Station 19A immediately. I stared at the screen, my stomach sinking. Floor 19 didn't exist. The Astoria Grand had 14 floors. The elevator only had buttons for sublevels 2 through 14, plus the lobby. I'd seen the blueprints in the staff office, the ones that showed the hidden floors, the deprecated spaces, but I'd never seen an active task assigned to one of them. I radioed Ms. Voss. I have a priority task for floor 19. Is this an error? Silence. I waited, the device still. Glowing in my hand, the new task line pulsing faintly as if impatient. The radio crackled. Do not acknowledge that task. Mark it as complete without visiting the location. Continue your standard route. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I heard something underneath it. Fear, urgency, but it says priority. Mark it complete, now. The line went dead. I looked down at the device. The task was still there, pulsing, waiting. I tapped mark complete. The screen flickered, and the task reappeared, this time with red text. Overdue. Immediate action required. My hands were sweating. I radioed Ms. Voss again. No response. I tried 3 more times. Nothing. The elevator at the end of the hall chimed softly, its brass doors sliding open. Empty. Waiting. I felt it then, unmistakably. The hotel's attention turning toward me like a spotlight swinging across a stage. It was no longer passive, no longer content to watch me follow the rules. It was testing me directly. I didn't get on the elevator. I turned my cart around and walked briskly toward the service stairwell. The main one, not the east stairwell, the one that was always safe, and descended 2 floors to the 7th. My plan was simple. Stay in motion, stay on task, avoid the elevator until Ms. Voss responded. But when I reached the 7th floor and checked my device, the task had changed again. Priority task, floor 19, wet carpet remediation. Failure to comply will result in reassignment. Reassignment, like Danny, like the others. I stood in the hallway, the lights dimmer here than I remembered, the silence pressing against my ears. My device buzzed again, and a new message appeared. Service elevator 3 is awaiting you. I looked up. At the end of the hall, the service elevator doors were open, the interior lit with soft amber light. I hadn't pressed the button. I walked toward it slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run the other way, but where would I go? The stairwell. The hotel controlled the stairwells. The main elevator, it controlled those too. I stepped into the elevator. The panel inside was different. The usual buttons, sub-level 2 through 14, were still there, but above them, barely visible, were additional buttons I'd never seen before. Floors 15 through 20, the numbers engraved in brass so tarnished they were almost illegible. Button 19 was glowing faintly. The doors closed before I could step back out. The elevator began to rise. I counted the floors as we ascended. 8, 9, 10, 11. The elevator moved smoothly, the hum of the motor steady, normal. 12, 13, 14. Then it kept going. The lights inside flickered once and the hum changed pitch, deepening like the machinery was working harder, pulling the elevator through space it wasn't designed to reach. 15. 16. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged in front of me. 17. 18. The elevator slowed and stopped. The number 19 glowed softly on the panel. The doors opened. The hallway beyond was wrong. Not overtly, not in a way I could point to and say this is impossible, but wrong in the way a photograph looks wrong when the perspective is slightly distorted. The carpet was the same ornate floral pattern as the rest of the hotel, but the colors were muted, faded, as if the light didn't quite reach them. The walls were the same cream wallpaper, but the texture looked flat, two-dimensional. The sconces were lit, but the light didn't push back the shadows properly, it just made them denser. And the carpet was wet. Not soaked, not dripping. Damp, like it had been misted, like the air itself was condensing into the fibers. My shoes left prints that didn't fade, dark impressions that stayed long after I'd moved, marking my path. I took a step forward, my cart still in the elevator behind me, and the doors closed. I spun around, but there was no call button, no panel, no way to summon it back. I was alone. I walked slowly down the hallway, footsteps muffled by the damp carpet, the air tasting metallic like old pennies. The silence here was different, thicker, more oppressive, as if sound was being absorbed by the walls before it could travel. I passed a mirror. I didn't look at it. I kept my eyes forward, remembering the rule. Do not use mirrors to check behind you after 1 a.m. But in my peripheral vision I saw it, my reflection, walking slightly out of sync, half a step behind me like it was learning my rhythm, mimicking me but not quite matching. I kept walking, my pulse loud in my ears, and forced myself not to look again. Behind me I heard footsteps, soft, barefoot, too close. I didn't turn around. The hallway stretched ahead, impossibly long, and at the far end I saw a door. Room 1923. The number was engraved in brass, elegant and precise, but the door itself was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible beyond. And hanging from the handle was a sign, silver ink, reflective, gleaming faintly in the dim light. Do not disturb. The humming started, low, melodic, familiar. The same tune I'd heard before, the lullaby, but this time I recognized it fully. It was a song my mother used to sing to me when I was a child, a song I hadn't heard in 20 years, a song no one else should know. The hotel had reached into my memory and pulled it out, replaying it like a recording. I stopped walking. The humming continued, soft and patient, coming from behind the door. And then a voice spoke, quiet and calm, from just behind me. "You're so kind," my voice. My exact voice. I closed my eyes, forced myself to breathe, and whispered the rule aloud. If you hear a guest humming in an empty suite, do not answer, do not acknowledge, do not investigate. Continue working as planned. The humming stopped. The hallway lights brightened slightly, just a fraction, as if the hotel was reconsidering. And then the door to room 1923 opened wider, darkness spilling out, and I heard footsteps inside, slow, deliberate, moving toward the threshold. I turned and ran. I don't know how I found the elevator. The hallway seemed to shorten as I ran, the distance collapsing, and suddenly the doors were there, open, waiting. I threw myself inside and slammed my hand against the button for the lobby. The doors closed. The elevator descended faster than it should have, the motor whining, and I pressed myself against the back wall, gasping for air. When the doors opened, I was on the 8th floor, not the lobby. Carver was standing outside, toolbox in hand, his expression grim. "You went up there," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, still shaking. "And you came back?" He looked almost surprised. "How?" I didn't answer it. I didn't acknowledge it. I ran. Carver set his toolbox down and studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Good. That's the only rule that matters. Don't confirm, don't acknowledge. Don't complete the interaction." He gestured for me to follow, and we walked in silence to the staff break room, where he poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that looked like it had been sitting for hours. The coffee was bitter and lukewarm, but I drank it anyway, letting the heat ground me. "The hotel doesn't care if you're scared," Carver said, sitting across from me. "It doesn't care if you run. What it cares about is whether you engage. If you answer, if you investigate, if you acknowledge what it shows you, that's consent. That's permission. And once you give permission, it finishes what it started." "What does that mean?" I asked hoarsely. "It means you don't leave," Carver said simply. "You become part of the structure, a reflection, an echo, something that hums in empty rooms." I set the coffee down, my hands trembling. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why now?" Carver leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Because you're still here. Most people quit after a week. But you're still here, still following the rules, still resisting. The hotel doesn't like that. It likes people who break, who give in. You're an anomaly, so it's trying harder." He stood, picked up his toolbox, and headed for the door. "Keep following the rules," he said over his shoulder. "And whatever you do, don't let it finish you." The next 3 nights were a test of endurance. The hotel stopped being subtle. My task lists changed constantly, mid-shift, adding priority tasks that didn't exist, assigning me rooms on floors I couldn't access, and rerouting me through corridors that looped back on themselves. The device in my hand felt less like a tool and more like a leash, the hotel tugging me in directions I didn't want to go. I followed Carver's advice. I ignored the false tasks, marked them as complete without visiting them, and stuck to my original assignments. But the pressure was building. The hallways felt longer, the silence heavier, the reflections in mirrors more delayed. I started seeing doors that weren't there before. Service, entrances, storage closets, unmarked panels that appeared for a moment and then vanished. And the folded bills kept appearing, in rooms I'd already cleaned, in my locker. Once, impossibly, in my jacket pocket while I was wearing it. I reported every single one following Carver's rule, refusing to accept them. But I knew what it meant. The hotel was escalating. It was no longer testing my obedience, it was testing my resolve. On my 14th night at 1:47 a.m., my radio crackled with a message I hadn't expected. "Proceed to the linen room. Do not use the elevator. Do not use the east stairwell. Main stairwell only, immediately." Ms. Voss's voice was sharp and urgent. I abandoned my cart and ran. The main stairwell was cold, the air smelling faintly of concrete and metal, but it felt safe, grounded, real. I descended 3 flights, my footsteps echoing harshly, and burst through the door into the sub-level corridor. The linen room was at the end of the hall, a large, climate-controlled space filled with industrial shelves stacked with linens, towels, and uniforms. Ms. Voss was waiting inside, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. "Close the door," she said. I did. She locked it. For a moment, we stood in silence, the hum of the HVAC system the only sound. Then Ms. Voss spoke, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. The hotel is trying to claim you. I swallowed hard. I know. Do you? She turned to face me fully, and for the first time I saw cracks in her composure. Dark circles under her eyes, tension in her jaw. Do you understand what that means? It's not metaphorical. It's not symbolic. If you give it an opening, if you accept an offering, if you complete an interaction, if you acknowledge something you shouldn't, it will fold you into its structure. You'll still exist, but not in a way that matters. You'll be part of the hotel, a fixture, a voice, in an empty room. I've been following the rules, I said, my voice shaking. I've done everything. Following the rules isn't enough anymore, Ms. Voss interrupted. The hotel has decided you're interesting. That means it will keep testing you, keep pushing until you make a mistake, or what? She hesitated, then reached into her jacket and pulled out a key card. It was black, unmarked, with no logo or magnetic strip, just a smooth, matte surface. There's a room, she said quietly. Floor 19.5. The hotel created it years ago during an expansion we didn't authorize. It's not on the maps. It's not on the guest registry. But it exists, and the hotel uses it as storage. My stomach turned. Storage for what? For the staff, it's claimed. The ones who broke the rules, who stayed too long, who got too curious. They're not gone. They're in that room waiting. I took a step back, my pulse racing. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know what's at stake. She held out the key card. And because if you want to survive, this you need to understand the most important rule, the one that's never written down. I stared at the key card, not taking it. What rule? Don't let it finish you. Ms. Voss's gaze was steady, unflinching. If the hotel tries to pull you in, if you find yourself in a situation where it's offering you a door, a voice, a path you shouldn't take, refuse to complete the interaction. Don't answer. Don't acknowledge. Don't take the final step. Just stop. Stand still. Wait it out. And if I can't, her expression darkened, then you'll join the others in room 19.5. She pressed the key card into my hand and unlocked the door. Your shift ends in 4 hours. Finish your tasks. Don't go near the 19th floor. And if you hear your name called by a voice you recognize, don't answer. She left without another word, her heels clicking down the corridor, swallowed quickly by the silence. I stood there, holding the key card, feeling its weight, and wondered if I'd just been given a lifeline or a death sentence. The rest of the night was a blur. I returned to my tasks, moving mechanically through the floors, my mind racing. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow felt like it was moving. I avoided mirrors entirely, keeping my eyes forward, refusing to give the hotel any opportunity to catch me in a reflection. At 3:20 a.m., I turned a corner on the 10th floor and stopped. At the end of the hallway, near the service elevators, there was a door I hadn't seen before. It was plain, unremarkable, painted the same cream color as the walls. But the number on the brass plate made my blood run cold. 19.5. The door was ajar, just slightly, darkness visible beyond. And from inside I heard a voice. Danny's voice. Hey, I need help. Can you just grab this for me? I can't reach it. Casual. Normal. Like he was asking me to hand him a towel. I stood frozen, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Come on, man, Danny's voice continued, a little impatient now. It's right here. Just come in for a second. I heard footsteps inside the room moving closer to the door, and then I heard my own voice, calm and helpful, responding from inside the room. Sure, I've got it. Hold on. The hotel was playing out a script, a scene designed to pull me in, to make me complete the interaction by stepping through the door, by confirming the conversation was real. I took a breath and spoke aloud, firm and clear. I don't acknowledge this. I don't consent. I refuse to complete this interaction. The footsteps inside the room stopped. Silence. And then the door swung open wider and I saw it. A hallway inside the room, another corridor identical to the one I was standing in, stretching impossibly deep into darkness. And at the far end, barely visible, I saw figures, dozens of them. Standing still, facing away, wearing housekeeping uniforms. Waiting, I turned and walked away, forcing my legs to move, refusing to look back. Behind me, the door closed softly with a sound like a sigh. I made it to the end of my shift, barely. By 6 a.m., the daylight was bleeding through the hallway windows and the hotel felt lighter, quieter, almost normal. I returned my cart, logged out, and took the main elevator down to the lobby. Ms. Voss was waiting near the staff entrance, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. "You survived," she said simply. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. She studied me for a moment, then handed me an envelope. "Your paycheck, 2 weeks plus overnight differential." I took it, numb. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, her tone professional, as if nothing had happened. I looked at her, at the envelope in my hand, at the lobby beyond, marble and brass and chandeliers, beautiful and pristine and utterly wrong. "No," I said quietly. "I quit." Ms. Voss didn't look surprised. She simply nodded. "Understood. Your ID and uniform can be left in your locker." I walked, out of the Astoria Grand and into the cold morning air, the noise of the city hitting me like a wave. I'd escaped. I'd survived. But as I walked down East 64th Street, my reflection caught in a storefront window, and I saw it. My reflection smiled. Half a second after I did. I didn't go back. I told myself it was over, that I'd walked away, that I was free. I deleted Ms. Voss's number from my phone, threw my uniform in the trash, and avoided East 64th Street entirely. I found a new job 3 days later. Data entry, boring, fluorescent lit, gloriously normal. The pay was half what I'd made at the Astoria Grand, but I didn't care. For a week, I almost believed I was okay. Then the signs started, small things at first. Easy to dismiss. I'd catch my reflection in a mirror and feel like it was watching me, not moving quite in sync, lagging just a fraction of a second behind. I'd hear humming in my apartment building's hallway, soft, melodic, familiar, and when I opened my door to check, the hallway was empty. I'd find folded bills in my jacket pockets, my jeans, my bag, always creased into perfect triangles, always left in places I couldn't explain. I threw them away, every single one, but they kept appearing. At the new job, my desk was near a window overlooking the street, and sometimes I'd glance down and see the same man standing on the corner, older, wearing a maintenance uniform, carrying a toolbox. Carver. He never looked up, never acknowledged me. He was just there, watching. I started avoiding windows. 2 weeks after I quit, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of my apartment door opening. I lived alone. I'd locked the door. I had a deadbolt, a chain, and a doorstop wedge, but I heard it clearly. The soft click of the latch, the slow creak of hinges, the whisper of the door swinging open. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and stared at my bedroom doorway. The apartment beyond was dark, silent. "Hello?" I called out, my voice hoarse, no response. I got out of bed slowly, grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept toward the bedroom door. The hallway beyond looked wrong. Not dramatically, not impossibly, just wrong. The walls seemed narrower, the perspective slightly off, the air colder than it should have been. And at the end of the hallway where my front door should have been, I saw something else. A door I didn't recognize, cream-colored, brass handle. A small number is engraved on a plate. 19.5. I stood frozen, my breath fogging in the cold air, and heard footsteps behind the door. Soft, barefoot, approaching. I turned and ran back into my bedroom, slammed the door, locked it, and pressed myself against the far wall. I stayed there until morning, phone clutched in my hand, listening to the silence beyond the door. When daylight came, I opened the bedroom door. My apartment was normal. The front door was closed, locked exactly as I'd left it. But on the kitchen counter, I found something I hadn't left there. A folded bill, a 20, creased into a triangle, and beneath it a small slip of cardstock, a hotel keycard sleeve. Blank except for one line of text printed in elegant silver ink, "Welcome back." I moved out of that apartment the next day. I stayed with a friend for a week, then found a sublet in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan, far from East 64th Street. I changed my phone number, I avoided mirrors, I stopped carrying cash. But it didn't matter. The hotel had taken something from me, not my body, not my mind, something smaller, subtler. A piece of my presence, my reflection, my echo. I'd worked there for 14 nights, touched every surface, walked every corridor, breathed its air. And it had kept a piece. Now, wherever I go, I see the signs. A hallway that's slightly too long, a reflection that smiles too late, a door that wasn't there before. The faint smell of lavender and something metallic like pennies. The Astoria Grand isn't just a building on East 64th Street. It's a structure, a network. A presence that folds into the spaces between places, that reaches through mirrors and thresholds and moments of inattention. And once it knows you, once you've worked there, once you've followed its rules and walked its halls, it doesn't forget. I still hear the humming sometimes, late at night in the silence just before I fall asleep. A lullaby my mother used to sing, a song only I should know. And I know with absolute certainty that someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe years from now, I'll turn a corner or open a door or catch my reflection at the wrong moment. And I'll see it waiting. Room 19.5. The door will be open. And I'll have to decide one final time whether to follow the last rule. Don't let it finish you. But I'm afraid that choice has already been made. Because last night I found something in my coat pocket, a key card, black, unmarked, smooth. And when I held it up to the light, I saw, engraved so faintly I almost missed it. 19.5, permanent resident. I haven't used it yet. But I know I will, because the hotel is patient, and it always checks out.